I'm Nick Slavik. I'm the proprietor of the Nick Slavik Painting and Restoration Company. I'm also the host of this show, Ask a Painter Live, which is a weekly live Facebook show where I use my almost 3 decades of experience in this trade to answer any questions, talk about any topics, and basically combine two things that Tom and I both love, data and feelings, into this sort of thing. So today we are obviously going to be talking with Tom Droste of Estimate Rocket. There's a whole bunch of things to talk about. Estimate Rocket is only one of them. Tom's a business owner. He has a vision conference going on. Last time we did this, I was telling your wife that I felt really self-conscious because it felt like after about 10 minutes, it felt like we regressed into two business owners having coffee and talking about the things we're most interested in. So honestly, not bad feedback on the show. So
right.
I'm feeling we might regress back into that sooner or later. So
For sure.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is an open show. You can ask Tom. You can ask me anything you guys want to know. I really appreciate you guys joining us this morning. It is a winter wonderland out here in Minnesota. So we got my fake fire, the best I can do back here. We got a foot of fresh snow yesterday, and all my kids are sledding right outside this window here. And this is what we live in Minnesota for, this stuff. So, Tom, first off, before we dive into all the heady sort of data and feeling stuff, tell us about Estimate Rocket for those who don't know about it.
Sure. So Estimate Rocket is a platform for service contractors to basically run their businesses from lead to paid. But we have some focuses on things that are very specific to contractors and help them to grow their businesses specifically, because that's really a big thing that we found that contractors need help with. And that's really what we're about, is helping them thrive and succeed.
And one thing that I've always the impression that you and Estimate Rocket leave on me all the time is that, yes, it's a technical piece of, I think I can call it software that will help a painter, but you guys also know, as business owners yourself, it's not about just what that estimate template looks like. It's all that data and all that other stuff on the back end that makes it successful. So my impression has always been you guys are very intentional and very conscious of everything besides just the flagship estimate form.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And part of that comes from my background was accounting before I started working in software. So I bring those accounting business fundamentals into everything I do. I don't want to make it like accounting software. I want it to be way easier than accounting software, but it needs to have some things that tie the ends together and make everything meaningful when you actually look at the output of it in the reports.
No, and I love that sort of thing. And it's not a coincidence that, when you look into the chief operating officers, chief executive officers of a lot of businesses, they have a real rigorous financial background, because that is honestly one of the most helpful things. And I confided in you the last show that I double minored in 2 forms of accounting in college, and I learned just enough to know to hire a good CPA. So, I know I didn't, but again, that base level knowledge is insanely helpful.
Really helpful.
And I see that as a theme through what you guys do and what you guys create.
Yeah, it is really important as a business owner and even as an employee of business to have some understanding of what a profit and loss statement is and what a balance sheet is and how they work. And, they're relatively simple at their heart. They can become really, really complex, but not necessarily. But understanding the fundamentals of them is well worth it, because then you understand where, hey, we thought we were here and we're here. Well, why are we? Well, these numbers here to explain why. All those receipts.
I had a really interesting revelation in the last couple of weeks here, which was, it's the end of the year. Us business owners get super introspective. We start reading poetry books, and we start going back into our business books, and we start trying to find meaning, and we start planning for what's the world going to look like? What do I wish for my kids? It's that time of year,
Right.
And in talking to a bunch of business owners recently, I've realized that they judge the success and failure or mediocrity of their business based on their tax forms at the end of the year. And for those of us who have a background in accounting, you understand tax accounting is not the same as internal key performance indicators or managerial accounting, as most people call it. And you can't use that as a level that is governed by laws of the federal government and deductions and things that don't really matter to the business. So, man, I feel for those business owners who are basically waiting for April to find out how their businesses did. And sadly, Tom, as you know, that tax return isn't going to give you a lot of answers.
No, no, it's going to give you a lot of questions. That's what it's going to give you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, most painters don't understand their internal managerial numbers, let alone the federal tax code and how that implies to their business. So
Sure.
I did see Chris Shank just posted. You guys have a vision conference going on, and I was looking at it this week. In the next, you guys just did profit planning. The next gathering you'll have is about cost benefit analysis, which is like one of my favorite things on the face of the planet. Like, what are people going to get in that?
I just think we're gonna talk a lot about the different things that you can control in your business, and how to look at them. And after our previous discussion, we'll probably talk a little bit about what you can't control, because there's no point wasting your time on that. Be aware of it, move on, to the things that you can work on and control. So we'll talk a little bit about things like training. What is it? Why do we want to train our people? It's just going to cost time and money for us to go train. Well, yeah, but if your people get better and they learn new skills and new things, it makes your company more valuable in the marketplace and your people more valuable in the marketplace. So it really, really makes a big difference.
The biggest takeaway I have from this last year when talking to other business owners, not just paint business owners, is basically that, controlling what you can control, because there's two big things going on right now. And this is a perfect segue to what we were talking before, which is material shortage, material price increase. And now all of a sudden in the national news is hammering inflation, which means the same things we bought last year are just going to cost more. And you and I assume both believe the same thing, which is, do you feel like you can control the amount and the price of paint that Sherwin-Williams or Benjamin Moore is going to turn out?
Not so much.
No, not really. I mean, a worthy effort, but good luck. And again, most of us don't even understand the macro economy, let alone what inflation is and how it's going to affect us. So if you hang your hat on next year saying, you know what, I'm not going to do all these things because it's going to be inflation, what are you going to do? Tom, what do we say to people about that sort of stuff?
Set it aside and move on, move ahead.
Worry about the things you can control as a business owner. And you brought up the perfect thing, training, which is 40 to 50% of all of our revenue will use to pay for humans in our business. So materials, 10 to 15%, give or take. So if you think you're going to make some miraculous change in your business based on a can of paint, and that's going to move you from unprofitable, horrible business to profit, boy, if you can do that with materials, I would love to see that. I've never seen one example. I have seen miraculous turnarounds with what you said. Training your people. 40 to 50% of your revenue is going to be used to fund the humans in your company. That's where you need to put your time and effort. That's a direct thing you can impact.
Absolutely. And it pays back over and over for both the company and for your team members. I mean, as they grow, they feel better, they work better, and they're going to do more and better for you.
And it's interesting. Cost benefit analysis is one of my favorite things. I took away like 3 or 4 just staples of the economic terms, a tragedy of the commons, cost benefit analysis, opportunity cost. These are things that you're smiling because this is the things that we love. Cost benefit analysis is, if you have 80 hours to put into your business, you let's say you have a choice, train somebody. In my company, we have a 2-week apprenticeship, 80 hours, where we have a training facility. We can bring you in and train you, or mess around with materials. It's going to cost, give or take, I think in my company, it costs $2,440 to train somebody who's never painted before to do basic painting. And in the cost benefit analysis, in return, if they do well, they can return $15,000 to $20,000 for the company in their first year. If you had 80 hours to mess around with a can of paint to try to get a $15,000 return on it in a year, and we laugh because it's not possible.
No, it's not. It is absolutely not possible. And that cost benefit, the other thing that I think is important, we got educated in accounting, which was great, and I appreciate it. But the important thing is that it doesn't have to be complex, but you have to pay attention. You have to learn enough to know how to make some decisions and what to look at to know, how to make your company better and where the pain points are. And you just brought up a great one, the ratio of labor to materials. I mean, knowing that and going, oh, I need to focus here on this side because there really isn't the same kind of opportunity here that there is on the other side. And once you do that, you're like, oh, so let's let that go.
And it's to me that we're basically talking about job costing, which is something near and dear to our hearts. And it's something that, based on the data we have about the painting industry, it's believed that somewhere between 90 and 98% of all painters probably do not know what this is and probably do not do it. And it is legitimately the key to any business. This is not a weird painting specific thing. People, the basic measure, if you were going to talk to a private equity firm and they were going to, you were going to say, hey, you should buy my painting business, the first thing they're going to ask for is, what's the ratio of inputs to outputs and what's the possible profit margin there? And most people say, hey, I made this much this last year. And they're going to say, that's not what I asked. I want to know how much you have to spend or use to produce a product on the other side. And that ratio is that's the first knee-jerk sniff test that everybody does in business.
Yep. Gross profit.
Gross profit. And okay, so Tom, the main thrust of this, we're going down some avenues already. The main thrust of this is planning. And obviously your conference is doing that progressively. And I see dates all the way out till February. But when you think about 2021, people are going to start thinking about, there's no good people out here. There's inflation, there's stagnation, there's this and that. But those are all macro kind of things that, again, we believe we can't control. So if that's all you're going to talk about, that doesn't feel like well-used effort. What should we be talking about for 2021?
Well, I think obviously the labor. So we can't do anything about the big labor problem. However, we can do some things with our labor problems and issues, and we need to focus on that. So we talked a minute ago about a little bit about training. Hey, if you've got some good people, give them more training. They'll be, you'll be able to get more productivity. And I think the other thing, and I know, I think I saw this on Instagram on one of your posts about, how you hire people, hire for attitude and don't hire, the training, you brought up the training ratio. You can train someone, yes, it will cost you money to train them. However, the return on that is huge. And you may not want to get experienced help all the time. You may want to have a training program where you're constantly bringing people out. And I think there's fear of that, I'm going to train them, I'm going to spend all this money, and then they're going to leave. Well, they're only going to leave if you're not treating them fairly or you're not giving them the opportunities to grow.
And the training is not just, like in my company, it's the 2 weeks with a recruiter in these training modules. But after that, then the mentorship starts. It's at least a 1-year process. And after that, we still do it. So again, it's not that we're living in a completely new world where if you actively want to grow a business and grow a really progressive, cool business with great core values, I am firmly in the belief that you cannot put an ad out for experienced painters and grow at the rate that we need to counter the attrition that naturally happens and get enough people you need with the core values. So legitimately, the one piece of perspective that I now know that I did not have years ago was that substantial, ongoing, super innovative, interesting companies constantly recruit and constantly make their own. They are not relying on the people they need with the skills they need to just be floating around out there in the geographical area in the time that they want them, that are looking for that. You're laughing because when you talk about it like that, it's like, of course you're not going to find that. Like data plus feelings, which we love.
Right.
I ran the data from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and at any one time, it's likely there is only about 152 people that call themselves painters in the entire state of Minnesota that are unemployed.
Wow.
And again, what is the chance that one of those is in my geographical area, is looking for a job, sees the ad on Indeed or ZipRecruiter that I put out, recognizes it and contact? I mean, we're talking needle in a haystack. So the data plus the feelings is, yes, it's hard out there. But the piece of perspective I have that I did not have was that I felt like I was using too much time and too much money to grow this business. Like, why aren't these people just coming to me naturally? Why don't they naturally just have the things I want? No real business relies on that. They spend tons of time, tons of money, intentionality on creating this. And constantly, if you hire 10 people and you only needed 5, guess what? Don't stop. Keep that course going. Just like you said, keep that farm team running and just make your own. And that's I feel comforted now that I know that good companies do that, and I'm not wasting my effort.
We talked a little bit about, and I know it's harder for when you're your first hire is probably the most difficult hire you'll ever make, and that's a challenge. We talked a little bit about in the sales planning process, backlog. So many people are afraid of backlog, and they're afraid of overcommitting. You don't have to overcommit. Schedule out. People, if you're good at what you do and you have a good reputation, people are okay to say, you're going to get something. Oh no, I got to have it next week, or forget it. But you're going to get a lot of people say, yeah, 4 or 5 weeks, that's fine. That's not a rush thing. We're looking forward to doing it. Now all of a sudden you've got this book of business that goes out 2 or 3 months, and all of a sudden it's, hey, I can actually afford to hire somebody now and get him on the team and start building it out.
Oh, a great question from, we're going to go down that road. But Justin Fry from Facebook, he wants to know, what does a great hiring ad look like? And what does that look like for you, Tom?
It's hiring. It depends upon who you're hiring. I mean, they vary depending upon who the target is. I do think there's a new, and I'm kind of old school, I will admit this, and I've learned some new tricks in recent years, but there's really a focus on, especially with young people, there's a focus about culture now. And culture is like the first thing that people are going down the list of. So things that you're talking about in general in your ad about your company, what your company is about, and getting people to be able to go, hey, that actually sounds like it might be an interesting place to work, and I'll feel valued, and I'll be able to be productive. And so, I'm not a great, I would ask a marketing person how to actually write that ad, but I think you have to talk about what, if you've got a good company, you got to tell people about your company and who you are and what you're about.
It's really interesting because, when I travel around and give these master's classes,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I could check the box heavily by just showing up and saying, here's the things that I do in my business. Here's an example, but
Right.
I also want to connect it to intentionality and why. So I go to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. I go to all these surveys. Legitimately, the one thing that blew my mind about a year ago was you go to LinkedIn surveys, you go to the Pew Research Center, you go to Gallup polls. Those are the ones that the most trusted polling organizations in the world.
Right.
Universally, when they interview Gen Z and millennials, which is basically everybody under 40, the top number one thing that they are looking for in business. If you asked us old timers who have been in this industry a while, you'd say, all they want are trophies and money, and they don't want to work. And legitimately, that is nothing. They want development and connectedness. And by far, it's not like, well, pay is number 2 and there's only a 1 point difference. No, there is one bar on that bar graph that's like they want connectedness, training, and development. And honestly, from the business owner point of view, it's exhausting sometimes because it takes a ton of effort, especially for people who grew up in an industry. I grew up in an industry where we're going to hire you, and I don't ever want to hear from you again. You are going to show up to work every day, and you are going to break yourself, continuously improve. Don't give me any hassle, and let's just coexist. And so
those were the days. Those were the days.
I'm so glad. I feel like I have a foot in 2 worlds, right? Because like I got brought up in the most typical contracting business in the United States for the last 50 years, which was dad was a journalist, couldn't find a future in it. So he painted like he did in college. And then mom did the books. And then he forced his sons into the business after that. And it was basically, that was every trades business in the United States for the last 50 years basically started that way. And now, we're doing cloud computing, social media stuff, we're doing core values, and we're having goal setting and review. So it's like, I have a foot in both worlds, it feels like, but I'm so glad I do, because it kind of gives you that perspective of like, that is a thing that's gone now. There's nobody who gets a job, stays for 41 years, retires, and moves on with their life. So
doesn't work. No.
All right, let's go. I think we got Anthony K. Do you have a bankroll for new employees, or do you plan on incoming jobs to foot the bill for their payroll? That is that feels like a chicken and the egg thing with planning. Tom, deep thoughts on that one?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of my personal focuses as I'm doing my planning is, and many coaches have talked to me in the past and said the phrase "cash is king." So, part of your efforts, even when you're just getting started, is you do have to build up a cash reserve. And And when you go to hire, yeah, the future jobs are going to pay for it. No question about it. And backlog is key when it comes to, hey, having that backlog out there to know that you've got business coming to support hiring someone. But you got to bank. Yes, you do have to bankroll a little up front because you got to be able to pay them each week while you're waiting for the invoices to get paid. So yeah, having cash is important, and making that part of your whole planning process is really important. Cash is actually a line in our plan. So it's, sales, profit, and cash, because you need cash to fund things. So that needs to be part of your planning process.
So interesting data point for everybody out there. In the last 5 years, we basically reset my business, right? I had 3 people working for me, and they all left on one Friday night. And, one of them went to go be a pilot, other went to religious mission work, all great things, right? Which leaves business owners in a bad spot, which is, I couldn't be more pissed right now.
Right.
I'm so proud of you. You know what I mean? It's like, these are one of those adult lessons where it's not like, this would have been way easier if they all would have left, started a painting company in the same town and said, we're going to do everything this does, but better. That's like, but this is one of those lessons where it's like, okay, in the last 5 years, growing this business, that first year after we reset, I hired and trained 10 people. And I will tell you this, what Tom said is absolutely true. And if you can do it that way, please do that. I did not do it that way. I did not have a pile of cash that was carefully eked out to make sure that we did this. What I did was I used my own. So problems get solved with money and effort, right? So you can solve it with money. That's a very sophisticated, smart, intelligent thing to do. I used my own effort, which that was an intentional thing. Because at that point, I just worked extra hours to make sure we had that money coming in, to make sure that we had people, our payroll covered and everything else. That, and I knew that obviously we're probably not going to be coming, blow the barn doors open, people making a whole bunch of profit right away.
Right.
So I was really intentional about, I need to devote my entire life to training these people into making sure they're up to speed. And Adam Larson, one of the first people I ever hired, awesome guy from town, a teacher, he just commented too, training was different then. Absolutely. Adam had a very interesting experience in my business, which was I was still sloughing off the ways of my father in running a business, which was, again, remember, I want to hire you forever, and I don't ever want to hear you speak. And I'm constantly going to yell at you, do it better and do it faster, and act always disappointed in your work like that. So Adam is one of the toughest dudes on the planet, because he put up with me for a lot of years based on that as I was evolving as a leader. But it's a good point for Mr. Cade, which was, listen, most business owners, especially young business owners, aren't sophisticated enough to say, I'm going to put away 80K and then we're going to do this and use that as my cushion. A lot of the times we're growing young families too. So just know that, don't use that money as an excuse. If you want to grow this, you have one of the greatest assets that has ever been invented, which is your time. And you can choose to use it how you want. And I have forsaken many evenings and weekends with my family in order to grow that business. But now, coming back to it. So time or money will solve problems, or both.
And when I say pile of cash, ideally, more is better. However, I just mean, especially at times like that, when you're getting the first person or that incremental person, that's a stretch for you. Just having the 2-week cushion so you can make that payroll. It doesn't have to be a huge pile of cash. You just have to plan on it and know, okay, I got this covered for 2 weeks. I know that's where the analytics come in, from knowing about your business and what you have in the queue, what you have coming, what you're about to be able to bill. All those things become very important. And, the more you get, the bigger you get a little bit longer runway. But when you're small, that runway is a couple weeks, and you got to make sure you're just thinking ahead of it and getting ahead of it. Hey, I can delay this expense till the next month because the guy, that vendor is good. He's on to me growing. He's good with me. I can give you an extra 30 days to pay your materials bill, for example, or whatever, there's lots of different examples of that. And then then you can say, okay, good. I got it covered. Now I can move forward.
And a pile of cash is subjective too, right? Because when it was me plus one person, a 2-week payroll cushion was $2,000.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like that's, I mean, I do. So there's another thing I took away from college, just-in-time inventory, which has hurt the painting industry with material shortages because we only produce what we need. But I love it. One of the things I've practiced over the years is sort of just-in-time cash management too, which is, I feel like we run a razor's edge in this. I always like to put the money out where it can get a good return. Sometimes it's my business, sometimes it's an investment property, something else, but you don't, again, it's not great to have 3 years worth of revenue laying around because inflation will destroy it. But you also, it can get slim though too, but it's all subjective. Like right now we have a payroll cash reserve of $50K, and it's like, wow, that seems like a lot of money, except in my business, that's still 2 weeks. That can go away real quick. So, but that is I would say the minimum amount is just have that. And one of the things that I use too, which was, again, cash is elusive when you're growing a business because everything sucks it away, and you can be $300 to death very quickly. You know, you think, well, that's only 300, we'll do that. And then 6 of those pile up. But one of the things that I did very early on, based on my financial advisor's recommendation, was get a line of credit through your bank. And that is one of the most beautiful things. It's a loan that technically you have that you can use whenever you want. So all of a sudden on a Sunday night, if you realize you need $500 to make that payroll, that could be a very tough situation. If you have a line of credit, you go into your electronic bank, transfer $500, you owe a point or two on it. At the end of it, you can pay it back a day later if you want, but it's you don't have to go sit in front of a banker and do that stuff. So.
No, line of credit is really key. And I think people wait too long to talk to their bank about it. Obviously, you know, having a track record with your bank is great. And if it's a bank where you also have your mortgage, for example, that have a business account as well, you know, those things all contribute to helping the bank say, now you're probably not, if you're doing $250,000 in revenues a year, you're probably not going to get $1 million line of credit. However, at that stage, $10,000 line of credit is massive because all you need is, I need an extra 1,000 this week. And as Nick said, you can pay it back next week. And the rates on those line of credit loans are generally really, really attractive. I mean, it's not the interest isn't going to kill you on those things the way a long-term term loan would. But again, use it judiciously, pay it off when you don't need it. It's worth its weight in gold. Credit cards, by the way, is the other way. People very shy away from credit cards, but I have grown businesses by using credit cards effectively, paying them off appropriately. But if you need a month where you can't do it right away, or you can only pay half of it off, it's a great tool.
Agreed. And listen, all those things at your disposal. And if you have your eye on job costing, it will give you the confidence you need to say, hey, sometime in the future, I'll probably be able to pay this off. But Tom, I do the same things, which was 2 days ago. I worked for 4 weeks to get the main business credit card in my company. The line of credit increased, but it's even though you put up some big numbers and stuff, those credit card companies, they'll still, it's not an easy thing. That you think credit card companies want to give you a whole bunch of credit and all this stuff, and it's interesting out there. But all tools, right?
Yeah, that is definitely worth doing. I'm gonna opine for the old days. The old days, you talk to your bank, hey Joe, I need $50,000 line of credit. Yeah, you're paying all your bills. Okay. Now it's like getting a colonoscopy.
Listen,
you got a line of credit, but you got to do it. I'm not saying not to do it.
No, and it is 100% worthwhile because again, it's like real businesses do this, but then real businesses also know that there's a profitable model out there so that they can pay this back. And this is a temporary tool. This is a flex tool. This is not there are different ways to think about credit and all this stuff, which is in the year of COVID, we bought a commercial facility. That is a long-term 20-year obligation to that where you're actually growing equity in something. The credit card and the line of credit really is one of those things like you're just seeing a temporary dip in cash flow. This will fill the reserve up, but then you do something very quickly again with it to do that. You don't use your credit card as a long-term equity building strategy like that. That is just a temporary level out the tide a little bit.
Yeah, and it is a tool if you're using it effectively and paying it off every month. It does give you that latitude of, okay, I don't need that cash until the payment date next 30 days. Again, all these things you struggle with and they ebb and flow, but the plan, that's why you planning is so important because you need to pay those things back. You don't want to get in a long-term, credit card debt or even line of credit debt, but you need to use them when you need them and then, pay them off. It's just, it's all part of that process, and it's not an easy, necessarily an easy process, but wherever you start and whatever you do gets you 100% further than you were before.
All right. So slipping into super selfish, two business owners having a cup of coffee and forget that we're live on the internet mode. You own a business. How do you plan for next year? I actually saw Instagram posts of your team of the planning and stuff. What is your process?
So our process starts out with, and this is a relatively new, we started a new program for this just about 2 years now ago. And this particular session, which we just finished this week for the next quarter, for the first quarter next year, was our best session yet. And, like anything else, it evolves and it gets, you get better and you refine it. But we start out with looking at, where we went, where we've been, how did we do last quarter? And then we start looking, and this is all really based on a 3-year plan, but the 3-year plan is a dream. That's just okay, we're throw the spitball out there. And then you break it down then you go from the 3-year plan down to a 1-year plan. Mm-hmm. And then from 1-year plan, you go down to quarterly plans. And what do those consist of? They are looking at where we're going as a company, as a big picture, and then establishing or figuring out, and a lot of it is brainstorming and just us talking back and forth and new ideas that we've come up with over the previous quarter. But we end up coming up with 5 to 6 big picture things that we're going to work on that will contribute towards where we're trying to get to, where we believe we're going to go. And then those things get broken down into more individual tasks as needed to actually, see how we're progressing during the quarter. And we look at it, all quarter long and talk about it as a team on how we're doing on things. It has a red, yellow, green coding. So, as long as you're green, hey, it's all good. If you go yellow, you say, hey, I need some help on this, or I don't think we're going to make this. What do we need to replan because of that yellow or that red? Mm-hmm. To say, yep, not going to make it this quarter. That's going to take another quarter. So it really, a plan isn't a finished thing. It's a work in progress. You go through, you do it periodically, but it can evolve as you go through it. And the year plan, very frequently, by the time we get to the third quarter, we've changed tweaked a few things in that original, full year plan. So that's kind of, I know that's sort of a squishy version of what our plan is about, but that's the process. What do we have to do financially? What do we have to do with product? What do we have to do with marketing? What do we need to do with sales to get where we want to go and meet next year's goal?
The takeaway that I heard is you need to put a pin in the map somewhere in the future and work backwards to basically figure out today, what do we need to do to hit that goal? And legitimately, that is a sophisticated and mature business owners know that that's how it works, right? Like that's just how it works. This isn't a novel idea. Every real business out there, this is exactly what they do. And most of the time they are given that goal by somebody, chief operating officer, chief executive officer, and then they have to work back from it. But one of the best concepts I've ever been introduced to is that, which is when you talk to paint business owners, they all have the dream of blue drink in hand on a beach, business, stacking cash, as the kids say, and you not involved at all. And the problem is they are here today scraping a barn, and they have that in the future. And then there's basically nothing that connects it. They're like, well, listen, I'm just going to work really hard and that will happen. And you can grit your way through a couple of years of business and grow. Arguably, you could grow a pretty big business, but grit will not keep you there. You need to actually start this planning process. So that connecting the blue drink to scraping your barn and then figuring out, well, if we're going to accomplish that in 3, 5, 10 years, what should I do tomorrow in order to do that? That is the success of business.
Yeah, absolutely true. And it happens in all different forms, and there's all different stages of it. When there's 100 different models for how to put those plans together, but they all boil down to pin, as you said, pin in the map out in the future. Where do we think we want to go? and then back it off till, to 90-day chunks until you start chipping away at it.
So Justin Fry commented, going into my third year, I never thought about quarterly planning. So Justin, honestly, as somebody who's in progress of trying to be a leader and trying to be a business owner, I can tell you that up until about last year, I didn't do this either. High level, we were grit growing for many years. And I knew that, yes, 5 years ago when it was me and another painter, Adam, we could have done this quarterly planning in a 10-year thing, but I knew the low hanging fruit was we need a proven product. And then we need to make sure that our people are trained up. And there's that progression through there. Now we are sophisticated enough where we have our proven product. We have our people trained up. We got the employee resource guide, our handbook. We got job descriptions. We've done all the unsexy stuff that real businesses do. We added sophistication as we went. And now we're to the point where the leadership team who meets here is 5 or 6 people. And I can just bring something up. Like you said, bring up a problem and let the magic happen. Let everybody's own input come in. And it's not just you trying to figure this stuff out. And this quarterly list of things to do is a hell of a lot easier when you have a team, because you can take those things that need to be done and disperse them. And then, like you said, green, yellow, red, you can actually hold them accountable during the meeting to getting them done. When it was me and a single person painting company, you could make that list, but guess whose list that was? You're making your own list. And at that point, one of the most helpful things I did, I actually have a to-do list here. That's a Google spreadsheet. And there are legitimately 113 items on that list that are basically between, I need to do it this week to 5 years from now. Basically saying right now, boiling that down to 1 or 2 things and just saying not looking at the other list is a great thing. And it feels daunting. It feels crazy. But honestly, I keep that living list there. It's amazing how much stuff gets checked off.
Oh, yeah.
Legitimately, just pick one thing. If you do one thing a week, that's 52 things in a year. That's
and having that methodology for it is absolutely fantastic. I will tell you that it being, nearing our second year in this process, during this round, as the leadership team has gotten more and more involved and is taking a bigger role, we came down to the end of the process, and I said, I don't have anything on my list here. And the coach said, Exactly. You're doing exactly what you're supposed to do. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I need some to-dos here.
One could argue that you have the hardest thing on your list, which is holding everybody else accountable to their lists, which is that's a weird effort thing. Sometimes I wish that I just had, hey, Nick, find out a new process for net promoter score. Like, I wish I could just bury myself in that for a few days and come out of the other end. But leaders move beyond those technical, tactical sort of things eventually. And we have to, our job description is we need to have a sellable asset that has a high base level of quality. And how do we do that? Net promoter score is one of those things. So we have to take the chaos and focus it down to say, in order to have this business be something that's sellable someday and the product still be good, we need a net promoter score. So now you task it out to a team member and then we implement it, then we see the results. So we have to come up with the list in order to give it to people sometimes. So
no, true. And this is one of the tricky things here, is that this evolves as you grow. So the things you need when you're 1 or 2 people are different than the things you need when you're 15, 20, 100 people. So it keeps changing. But the planning process helps you be aware of that as you grow. So you start asking questions like, oh, well, maybe we need to look out more than a year now and see where where's the picture in 3 years? Because the other thing that does, as you get more leaders on your team, is, as you said, people will start standing up and say, well, I know the solution to that problem. And so when you look out 3 years and you say, that's where we want to be, your team will start looking at that and going, well, I think we're going to need to do this, and we're going to need to do that, and we're going to need to do this. And some of them aren't just to do things. They're sort of putting processes in place and, introducing new concepts or new training programs or things like that. But it starts to give everybody looks at that thing 3 years out, even though it's way out in the future, and starts thinking, okay, what do we need to do to get there? And then you back that off to, okay, what are we going to do this year to get there? And what are we going to do quarter by quarter this year to help get us closer to that goal?
It brings a lot of comfort. And I will say from perspective, when you think about a big goal, like, in 2020, we grew 40%. Like if you were, if in quarter one, you presented that goal, my team would have said, oh, Nick, 40%, let's double this company. Let's do this quarter one. Yeah, you're laughing because quarter one of 2020 was before the zombie apocalypse. Right.
Yeah.
And it was the strongest economy that you could do no wrong in.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, quarter two, it changed a little bit. And then if I would have presented that same 40% that said, I quit. If you want us to grow, our business is shut down right now. But when you think about what actually has to get done, if you say we're going to grow 40% this year and track it down to little weekly things that you can do, be like, oh, I can absolutely do that this week in order to hit that goal. And honestly, that's where the thing that we love, data and feelings, comes into play, which is, the feelings is we should just shut this business down. There's no point in this anymore. There's a global pandemic. We're probably not going to be allowed to go. But then the data says leads are coming in. People want to work for us. We're doing really good work going forward,
Yeah. I mean, there's always opportunities. There was a Canadian painting company that I was talking to early on in the pandemic, probably March or April. And they were booming, and basically he said, we're the only company answering the phone.
It's true.
And so people are desperate to get stuff done, and they just, they showed up. And that's what part of the planning thing is ignore the bullshit and just move forward.
That's it. And pay attention to, there's so many, like, this conversation is bringing up so many things that I wish I knew 5 years ago that I do know now to be true, which is really good businesses do all that mundane, unsexy, boring stuff really well and consistently.
Right.
Job costing is obviously the most touchable thing of that. It couldn't be more boring most of the time. You're adding up material and labor, but honestly, the people who do that every day consistently and then look at it and make decisions off it, that honestly might be the secret of business. People's ability to strap in and do that daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, right?
It's critical. Really is. Really makes things work.
And what people want is, a magic strategy, or they think that they're going to find a magic human that will do all this. But even those things, if you do find, listen, you could argue, I've been very lucky to find magic humans in this business here, but you have to realize that just putting all your just betting that will go on forever is not a thing. And you can extend that, like people will move and they'll have family things and whatever. You can extend that period where they're with you by being intentional and developing and having connectedness, but you do have to stay on it. You can never rest on your laurels. It feels like constant effort from guys in our chairs is basically what's needed. And just knowing that, I feel good about that effort now.
Right. You have to do it. If you don't do it, you will not be you'll not get there. I worry when I see smaller contractors who's got a lot of potential. They are great at the service part of the business, but as anybody in any business, you have to look at what you're doing right now and then say, okay, is this good for me for the next 30 years or 20 years or however long I think I want to go until I sort of change how I get, what I do every day, not necessarily retire, but you need to be looking towards some sort of an end game. As a business owner, you have to look at, ideally your business is never going to end. You may get to the end and you may sell it, or you may get to the end and some of your employees may buy you out. There's lots of end games. But you got to have something. You got to, when you get to that end game, and that's an important part. And it doesn't mean you don't have to set your goals at being Google or Apple or some or a $800 billion company. But you do have to set some goals, and this planning process can help you start to get a handle on. Okay, well, here's what we're doing, and we're struggling. What can we do to get what can we do to get to a different struggle?
Yeah, I love that. and a higher order struggle. And we hope that someday we've conquered enough of the lower struggles where our main struggle is how can I make the lives of my family, my community, the state, and the world better around us. We have the free time and the resources and the ability to actually take our efforts and money and then affect those around us, and not just keep our world so insular and things like that.
That's huge.
Man, so many takeaways from a conversation like this. I feel like we've started a list of, those things that I wish I would have known about real businesses, because I felt like a sucker all those years. It's there's like 1,000 thoughts going through my head right now about where to go next. Tom, what do you want to, what should we be thinking about?
So specifically short term, these kinds of planning conversations, but again, having part of that planning process be, hey, what if down the road? So this process that we use, actually, I mentioned 3 years, but there's also this thing called the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal. That's somewhere out in the future, like 10 years, 15 years, some unknown time. It's hard to plan even for a year, but this is like, how do you picture yourself? This is the blue drink with the umbrella on the beach, look at Billy Ray, or whatever it is, or you're doing volunteer work because you're done with the business side and you want to go make things better for other people and help other people. Having that picture out there is really critical, and ours is still a growth one. So, I still see us being in a whole different place 10 years from now, and serving hopefully a huge percentage of people and helping them thrive and build their businesses. And who knows, some of this planning stuff may become part of what we do because you need it. People need the help, and I needed the help. I've been working with a business coach for 30 years. Different ones along the way, because you need different coaches at different times.
That is true. And another great one of those, here's what real businesses do, knowing that when you put down the 10-year goal, which is honestly, Tom, the one I struggle with the most, because
it's hard.
You feel like such an egotistical ass sometimes when you do it. Like, I put this 10-year goal down and it's like, you just feel so self-conscious, especially us introverted people from Minnesota. Like, hey, we're going to have a $12 million company. You're like, all right, pal. Like, what? Okay. But honestly, when you back it up, you're like, listen, 10 years from now, we're a quarter of the way there. Like,
that's actually the coolest part for me in that exercise is the data. Because I say, okay, this is going to be this big number, but then you actually extrapolate it back a few years and it's like, hey, we actually could do that.
Confessions of a business owner. When I'm on planes, I use, Google's our platform for almost everything. And I put a lot of things to read offline, right? Things that'll keep my brain busy on the plane.
Yep.
I have a guilty pleasure that I do, which is I take different business models and I try to do quick sniff tests of revenue, inputs, material and labor, and how many people it would take to do that. And then you start playing with the next thing that's super interesting for me is, what does a support or a leadership team look like? Like, how many technical managers do you need per person? And you start playing around with those numbers, and you try to say, okay, thought experiment. I want a $10 million painting company, and let's see if we can get to a 25% true net profit, which is 10 points higher than an industry average. Yep. And I am such a nerd, man. I play around with these things on there like, okay, so here's the levers we can move. If we could get our sales team on an industry average to sell $1 million, but what if I can coach them up to sell $2 million? What would that look like? They would, and then, God, this is an idiot. So then you start thinking, okay, here's how many leads you need. Here's what those leads cost currently. Here's how many estimates they'd have to do a day. And you start putting the data to it. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what? It's going to be super intentional. It's going to take a lot of effort. But honestly, I think if I had the right leadership team, we could do a $10 million painting company with a 25% true net profit. Yeah. Millions of things would have to go right. But here it is on paper. And we know exactly what we'd have to do to get it right. And that's my guilty pleasure. I do those spreadsheets.
Millions of things have to go right for it to work. But actually, hundreds of things, or maybe even thousands of things could go wrong and you can still make it.
You know what? That is absolutely true. And we should say one of the smartest people I've ever met in our industry said something years ago that has never not stuck in my head, which was, we are limited only by our own ability to execute our business plans. So again, circle back to the start of this conversation. Right. If you think the pandemic was the reason you didn't do well, like Les, I was in New York, dudes got legally shut down, right? Okay, that hurts. Right. But a lot of them did really well that year. If you think inflation is the reason, if you think the labor stuff is, if you think the material prices are the things that holding you back, it's not that. Paint price increases are not that big of a deal. And there are 1,000 other levers in your business plan that you can pull. Right. And a lot of times we're super lax with the ones that are painful, that deal with us improving. And it's easy to point to Sherwin and Benjamin Moore and say, you guys need to do better because I'm staring at your numbers, So it's, it's part of like just holding, self-accountability is the hardest thing with all that.
Yeah,
really.
It is. Right. And we have to take ownership, and everybody on the team has to take ownership, and great things happen.
I love it. So I'm going to take one more look through to see if we missed any questions here. I love Chris Shank must be at the helm of Estimate Rocket this morning, and he's posting some comments too. Love Chris Shank. Chris Shank, if you can in time,
man.
One of the things that I always poke Chris Shank about and put him on the and put him in the spotlight of is Chris is one of the deepest thinkers I know and loves poetry. So, and I always ask him at the end of every time we have a thing, hit me with a line, hit me with something you've been thinking about. So Chris, if you're able, if you're at the helm and you have the time and the willingness, comment with something you've been reading lately, because he always comes across with a deep thought or something that sticks with us. So
he has an incredible reading list too. I'm telling you, that guy is a prolific reader.
What's really interesting is that Chris Shank and I go back to pre-industry. Before Chris Shank even entered this crazy world of paint business contracting, our wives were Instagram friends, and Chris and I knew each other before that. And when Chris got into the industry, he's like, "Hey, I'm kind of like getting into this painting world. I only know one house painter," and he talked to me, and then the relationship began. So kind of a crazy world. But my knee-jerk reaction to Chris's reading list was, that's all BS. Nobody reads that much heady stuff. You're saying that to make yourself look smarter, and then you realize he's read 10 times more than whatever you know about, and you're just like, oh wow, he's one of the ones who actually does read that stuff. So I love that.
Chris and I regularly have good conversations about reading.
All right, asked and received. So Chris Shank, the hallmark of a second rater is resentment of another person's accomplishment.
Ooh, very true.
Wow, that's spicy for Chris Shank too. I like that. That's a very declarative statement. Normally he gives something that's open for a lot of interpretation. I love that, man. I love that.
Classic.
Dave Pine, last question, and then Tom will give you a chance to close out the show here. Dave Pine, where's Estimate Rocket based out of? Just saw a pic of a Christmas party in Newburyport, Massachusetts, 20 minutes away from us. Would love to get together since our customers are trying to learn your services. Where are you guys out of?
We are in Newburyport. We walked to that party you saw. Shoot Tom at estimaterocket.com, and I can get you hooked up with the right people.
And I will say this, I've met Dave Pine, one of the coolest paint business owners you're ever going to meet. He does some super progressive stuff. He also puts out some really good social media content. So you guys would love to get together about that stuff. So, and it's also cool to hear the towns of Massachusetts, because some of my favorite colors in the world are Benjamin Moore colors, and all the historic line are basically named all after that, towns, all those old historic towns and stuff. So it's cool to see a name and a place connected. Yeah. All right. So, Mr. Droste, if people want to talk to you, if people want to learn about Estimate Rocket, if people want to learn about the conference you have going on, what do we do?
Sure. For all of those things, our website is great. If you want to get a hold of me directly, it's just Tom at estimaterocket.com. And happy to hear from you. We do have a chat on our website, and if you have Estimate Rocket, we have a chat inside of the app. So great. Another great way to get a hold of us. I think Chris just posted a link for the Vision Conference that we're doing, and we're coming into session 6 on that. And there's a total of 11. We're doing them every 2 weeks. So a lot of material. Hopefully you've already done your planning for this year, but this will be good help for next year's planning process or next quarter's planning process.
No, I love it. And Chris did post that link. I'm looking at the next conference you have, cost benefit analysis, which is again something that deeply interests me. Profit planning, smart priorities, team meetings, and company vision. So come on, folks. This is all the stuff that us business owners like. Doesn't matter what business you're in, and to be able to talk it over with somebody at a high level, good thing. So
fun stuff.
Tom, as always, thank you for taking time. It is Saturday. This is all family time kind of stuff. Chris, you as well at the helm here, and all the other painters watching. I appreciate this, but again, it's important to invest in ourselves and our futures and things like this, because in the day-to-day workings of what we do, it's a lot of reactionary stuff. We're working our plans and things, and it's good to take time to force yourself to take that second and third and fourth order thinking, and not limit you. So again, Tom, I don't get sick of this stuff with you. This is awesome.
I'm picturing a new series called businessmen in cars getting coffee or something like that.
I love this. Like two ex-accounting nerds who are now business owners who like to get together and talk about some economic terms, some business principles. Like I like this stuff a lot. So we will definitely stay in contact. Everybody, thank you for this. And this is the time of the year where business owners like to get introspective. If you look at my emails and DMs, it is all sorts of business owners having all sorts of these deep philosophical thoughts at the end of this year. And December is my favorite time forever. So, all right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everybody else. And have a good weekend.